I'm Esther Stapleton-Stone, and this is In the Boardroom. My guest today is Carol Hinds, and I'm so excited to be interviewing my dear friend who's had many years in the media. So we're going to have a real treat today on this podcast. So can you just share with our viewers where you grew up?
Yeah, I'm a Londoner, but I'm a Londoner who's lived more years outside of London than I did where I was born and raised. I'm a Southeast London girl, and I went away to university in Hull when I was 19, and then I came back to London briefly to do a master's, and then I went away again to Preston to do a postgraduate radio and TV journalism diploma, and then to Birmingham, my first place of work, which introduced me. I worked as a researcher. So, and I was moved around Pebble Mill, the main building in Birmingham back in the day, in the 80s. And it gave me a chance to see all different aspects of TV. So light entertainment, talk shows, quiz shows, music guests, as well as, a little stint in the newsroom, and then also because Pebble Mill was the home of, sort of BBC radio drama, I got to, sit in on a couple recordings of the Archers, and it was good. It was good training, and from that, I then discovered that I wanted to. I could work in television, and I went on to spend about 3.5 years in light entertainment.
Fantastic. That's like a whistle-top tour of Carol's just immediate beginning of her career, but there's more to come. So were you the first person in your family to be in media?
No, I can honestly say that my dad, when he came from Jamaica, he got a gig as a city reporter on the West Indian Gazette, which was probably the first newspaper set up for the Black communities settling here in the UK. And he also did some broadcasting. He was also a voice that would have been heard on the BBC Caribbean service. So, yes, I'd like to think that I was more following in his footsteps.
I just love the idea of just following in your dad's footsteps and his legacy and all of that. And as a daughter of a father that loves to do lots of community work, I can just, what's the word? I can relate to that, because I just think when you know that they've gone before and it's possible, it just gives you that extra reassurance.
Yeah, well, certainly at school, the idea that I certainly didn't go to a careers advisor and say, "Oh, I'm thinking of working as a broadcast journalist." I mean, that just wasn't possible. That just was beyond the scope of anybody, the realms of possibility, really. I mean, I can remember talking, with a careers advisor, and they were sort of like, you're a bright, capable girl. Perhaps you ought to be thinking about, working as a librarian. That way, access to knowledge and, sort of developing and exploring, sort of history a bit more. That would be a way into it. Certainly, it was not the idea of, and I even to my younger self, I wouldn't have said, guess what, you'll get an opportunity to, report on regional TV. I mean,
that's amazing, isn't it? Because I can remember just seeing a Black person on TV in general, and that was such a great thing. And it just gave us encouragement to have a drive to just go after things. So, yeah, that's really good. So what were the challenges you faced working in the media when you were starting out?
I think, as all things, it was just we'd had a trailblazer. Bastiana Belfont was the presenter of a Black magazine programme on BBC Two called Ebony, and it was targeted at the Black community, and it was all around the UK. So they take stories from, Bristol, Birmingham, Manchester, wherever, the heart of Black communities up and down, the country. But you're right. I mean, when Bastiana first appeared, I can remember Mum ringing my Auntie Gloria and saying, quick, switch on to BBC Two. There's a Black woman on BBC Two. And it was, it really was that sort of, wow, there's a, Black woman, fronting a programme on the BBC. She was years ahead of then the likes of Moira Stewart, who, was then to go on to read, sort of national news. So again, that was another milestone and a real rarity. But I digress. But for me, I think as I told you earlier, I got into television and found that there were different things in television. And so that took me away from the training that I had done at Preston Poly, sort of focusing on broadcast journalism, radio and TV. So I needed something to sort of get me back into it, because one thing about news people are quite sniffy about the idea that, oh, well, if you're serious about news, you should have been working in news from day one. When Moira Stewart appeared on screen, sort of years after Bastiana, reading the national news, again, another great landmark and watershed moment where people are like, oh, wow, didn't think it was possible that we would see somebody like that. Because when news started out, I mean, sort of even women being in news was a real rarity, let alone a Black woman. So, I go along and I do my course at Preston Polytechnic, and I go off and get this opportunity to work for the BBC as a researcher, and I find out all about, sort of television and a bit of radio, and then, follow that up with about 3.5 years in light entertainment, which was great. I enjoyed my time enormously. The problem with that then was when I wanted to get back into news people are quite sniffy about the idea that you've been working in light entertainment. So effectively, you're getting contestants for quiz shows and booking guests for talk shows, and, sort of it's seen as a bit sort of light and fluffy and not serious. So I am forever grateful that, looking as I so often did, sort of back in the day, Guardian media pages, there was a advert from the BBC looking for regional news reporters, and I applied, and I am happy to say I was successful, got chosen, and so was trained by the BBC as a regional news reporter.
Wow. So what did your parents and your family think about that?
I think it was, sort of like, sort of real surprise about, sort of the fact that I'm going to be a regional TV news reporter. And I think probably because they felt that, that my sister, my younger sister, Jackie, was probably, sort of more gregarious and outgoing and would be, sort of much more ideal. But actually, I think as the years went on and as I sort of grew in confidence and in the role and what I was doing, I think, yes, they were very, very proud and really impressed. And, they sort of said, there was a weekend where I had been to court in Derby reporting on a first appearance of a man who'd been charged with historic sex abuse, and they sort of said, they were down in London. Obviously, I'm off in Derby covering it, but it gets shown on the BBC News channel. And they said, yes, we know that that's your job. We know that you're a reporter. But suddenly, when you popped up, you know, and the presenter said, you know, so about, you know, this man appearing in court, historic sex abuse charges, you know, our reporter Carol Hinds reports from South Derbyshire Magistrates Court. They were like,
Mouth
oh,
dropping
that's
open. Wow.
our daughter. And they said, you know, it was a real, you know, sort of, you know, they said, despite the fact that we know that's what you do and you've been doing it for years, it just still seemed really strange to see you on screen, you know, reporting.
Wow. Oh, that's so great. That's so good. Yeah. And I suppose as well, they're contacting family back in Jamaica and saying, you know, Carol's made it, because to be on the BBC was such, and it still is, such a big deal, you know. So
Yeah, for them particularly, because they have always been loyal to the BBC brand, not because I work on it, but because, you know, as I say, you know, back in the day, Dad had been with the BBC Caribbean service, and the BBC, you know, they have always been BBC viewers, and even when ITV got Trevor McDonald, Sir Trevor, as he was to go on become, they just still felt that their loyalties was to the BBC. They just, you know, that was their preferred output. And in the days when we had so few, you know, just fewer channels, yeah, BBC One, you know, BBC Two was what they watched, and, you know, sort of Radio 4 was their radio station that would, you know, was on in the home.
and in the Caribbean, BBC World Service would be something that
Yeah,
people would
yeah,
listen to. So
yeah.
that's why I suppose, you know, it had that resonance and that, you know, the importance to a lot of Caribbean people. So that's really good, Carol. So I'm so happy to hear this. And so for anyone listening to this podcast that is just starting out on their career, and they're probably a bit like your personality when you first started, a bit quiet, a bit shy, what would you say to them?
I think if it's something that you really, really want to do, then you will persevere. It is a competitive industry. That hasn't changed. And that's always been the case. And I know it made, you know, people might think, oh, it looks, you know, sort of kind of easy, but it's not. But you've also got to be clear about what you're doing. I was interested in news, or, you know, sort of like, and I regard news as, you know, sort of like the history of today, and we're telling it today. And I'm just curious and nosy about what happens in the world. So it was like a perfect marriage for curiosity and nosiness. And I think if it's the case that you see yourself as somebody who just wants to be on television and wants to be known for being on television, I don't think news is necessarily the forum that you need to do that. I think you need to be looking at, you know, sort of trying out for Love Island, or, you know, Gogglebox, or, you know, sort of popular programs where, you know, sort of people can sort of have access, and that's the way to go. If you're serious about news, however, then I think, yeah, you need to, I just think, you know, do what you can, get out there and, you know, volunteer your services, and, you know, make a podcast. It doesn't have to be a news podcast. Just the very fact that you're getting skills together by, you know, you've got a passion about whatever the subject may be, and so you get to, you know, do your podcast on that, whether it's, you know, sort of baking, or, you know, sewing, or whatever. But it's the fact that you're getting it together, you're passionate about it, and that will stand you in good stead, as will, you know, sort of if you go on to training. I mean, I did a postgraduate radio and TV journalism course. These days now, there are degrees, bespoke, you know, dedicated degrees for broadcast journalism that will prepare you for working in radio, TV, online, you know, how to make podcasts. So, you know, there is so much out there now, and near enough. You know, again, when I was doing it, it was postgraduate radio and TV courses were few and far between. You know, now we're kind of like the USA. Any respectable town or city that has a university invariably will be offering you some sort of, sort of broadcast or journalism course. So it's for you to, look around, shop around and see what appeals to you.
Brilliant. Now you're speaking from experience because you are a lecturer at a university, and you actually help young people, students, to get into the media career. So you're talking from experience here, so which is great. So can you just share a little bit about what you do at the university?
Yeah, so I'm a lecturer at Nottingham Trent University. I'm a part-time lecturer, and I am a part of the teaching team for the broadcast journalism degree course. So these are the undergraduates. Nottingham Trent also offers a postgraduate, an MA in broadcast journalism. And so, I've enjoyed the last couple of years, teaching second years, and I'm very much involved in the practical side. So supervising news days, getting them in and putting them through the rigors of they work as if they were an actual newsroom with a morning production meeting to decide what's going to be on the agenda, what's going to be in the lunchtime bulletin, what's going to appear in the tea time programme at 4. And this is for radio and TV. They also have opportunities where they have to work online and produce an online story. So, they're out there with cameras to take pictures, write the story and then come back and, sort of write up the interviews and things like that. So it really is a really good grounding for, as I say, preparing them for what it'll be like. Where it slightly differs is, students are students. So, things don't always start on time, shall we say. People are a bit late arriving. And of course, in the business, I mean, you've got to be punctual. You can't, if the king is turning up to open a new centre in the middle of Nottingham, you can't turn up 10 minutes late. He's cut the ribbon, revealed the plaque that's, there to commemorate the fact that he came to open this centre. You're not going to be able to walk up to the king or his staff and sort of say, sorry, I'm late. Could you put the curtain back together? And could I put this ribbon up? And could you do, so I can get, to record it now? So it's things like that they've got, sort of get through. But it's really good preparation in that, they get and have to go through quite rigorously, sort of writing and reporting for television, writing and reporting for radio, writing and reporting online. And there's also things like law, where they have to know, sort of what it is legally, what we as reporters can and cannot report. And also just ethics. I know it may seem like sometimes reporters are cold, heartless people, but we do have ethics. There are standards that we like to meet. And, and then there's variations because they might want to go off and do a module on fashion journalism or photojournalism, politics, podcasting. So it's all out there. It's a very well-rounded course.
Now, things change and things develop. How do you keep yourself learning and open to learning? And especially now, social media is such a big thing. How does your course now incorporate that aspect?
Well, because as part of their assessments, yes, they are having to do things so that they might do a TV report, and they also have to do a version that could be put out on X, formerly known as Twitter, or they might have to they might do a radio piece and we ask them to put it up on Facebook, do a version that's appropriate to Facebook. We've got them also Instagram. We go out and just sort of say, okay, do us a piece and let's do it suitable to that particular platform, because that that is how, and we know full well that as youngsters, that's how they consume their news. They are, sadly, despite the best efforts of, sort of Sky, ITV, BBC, everyone's trying to chase that younger audience. But the reality is the younger audience does not sit down to watch news at 1 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock. That's sort of historic and harks back to a different time. Younger people, we know, consume their news on their phones. So, that's why, now we are, sort of pushing towards, as well as learning the, I suppose, sort of the orthodox way of working for, television, radio, that you also think about, those Instagram, X and the like. Yeah.
Love that. And I'm sure the viewers that are younger will appreciate that courses now are very relevant and which is good. So you've had boardroom experience. So how have you been able to transfer some of your skills from the media into the boardroom environment, and what kind of boardroom experience have you had over the years?
Well, I was made a patron. I was invited to become a patron of a cancer charity, BME Cancer Communities, based in Nottingham. And yes, I would, attend a couple of meetings a year, including the annual general meeting. And I think it was very, I think quite structured, as most, sort of organisations are. You've got your set agenda. We're working through that. People are reporting back if they, sort of been to conferences, or if they've got a body of work that's been published, or if there's a campaign that's been, sort of they've been airing. I know there was particularly, one to sort of get black men to get out there and get, it was, targeting prostate cancer, and just, reminded them, you've got to get out there, get yourself checked and so on, because, have, as so often happens, high representation of black men that are dying, to this disease, because of this disease. And yet, they're just reluctant to go and get themselves checked out, get examined and so on. So, so there would be all, sort of things like that. So I think some of the skills as a reporter, I can certainly stand up and, sort of deliver, sort of feedback on, whatever it may be. But so I suppose that, there are those transferable skills, being able to confidently, fundraising dinners, and being able to auction off items. That was just an extension of being a presenter, if you like. So you just get up there and talk to the audience like you're talking to a body of friends. But the thing is, you want, people to get out there and support the charity and do what they can in terms of buy things and so on.
So the founder of this organisation has recently passed. How has that affected the board dynamics?
Well, it's always difficult when you get, so you have to deal with loss, and particularly because Rose was such a driving force for the BME cancer communities. I mean, she really was. She wrote bodies of work, and spoken at conferences and been to conferences and so on, and come back and reported back to, sort of board meetings to give us an idea of what was out there in discussions and focus and so on. And, as a result, the organisation now has become the Rose Thompson Foundation, and its goal now is to physically bring about a building, to buy a building in Nottingham and make that a central hub for everything and anything you'd want to know about cancer, if you're from a Black or another, sort of ethnic community, that, so where you can go for advice. So it would be a library as well as offering, support, care, it'd be everything. So a general meeting, the last sort of general meeting where it was announced that this was going to become the foundation. So this is Rose's legacy, that we still remember her, but that we are going to take our energies and turn it into something tangible and something that will hopefully reward and help all the, sort of cancer communities out there from various, sort of ethnic groups.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that. If a listener, young or old, would like to volunteer to be a board member, what are the kind of things they could do in preparation for that experience? Not waiting for it to happen, but just like working now and getting those kind of skills. What can they do now if they say, oh, I'd love to be on a board, but I can't just go on a board now because I haven't quite got the skills? What kind of things could they do?
I just think if they're out there and they're volunteering, again, whatever the group might be that they, sort of work for, whether it's something social or community based, and it's just, it's amazing what you acquire. Sort of you're in your voluntary role and you might just sort of say, oh, well, I'm just coming in, once or twice a week and I just do this little bit. But you actually do sort of absorb more information than you think you do. And that's the sort of thing that will help you as you, sort of either the longer that you're doing it, the longer you're volunteering, more skills that you're picking up that you probably didn't realize that you suddenly knew. And then there comes a day where somebody says, oh, well, how do we go about this? And suddenly you hear your voice saying, actually, if we go to such a group, I think they'll be able to help us do such. And you think, where did that come from? I didn't realize I knew that. But yes, it's that kind of thing that it's just it's out there. It's by osmosis. As I say, my own personal experience was just that I got that invitation, and and so I would say the first couple of years with the Be Me, sort of cancer communities, I was kind of learning as I went along, and probably didn't inject that much into meetings, but certainly was listening, watching and listening.
Brilliant. And that is such an important skill to have on a board, because you don't always have to be speaking. There's so much you can do with listening. And when there is a need for a solution, because you have sat and you've listened, you can come up with something really practical to give to the board. So everything is important. And it doesn't matter what your personality type is. You've all got a role to play, whether you're boisterous or whether you're quiet. There's a role for each characteristic, which I absolutely love, on boards. So going back, when you were young and you started off in media, you were doing volunteering in a hospital. So can you just share with us what that experience did for you?
Yeah, I basically answered an advert in my local newspaper, and they were looking for volunteers for the local hospital broadcasting service, so Woolwich Hospital Broadcasting Service. And so I wrote a letter in, sort of saying, look, I'm available in the sixth form, doing my A-levels, but I still think, I've got time. I'd like to be able to, I think I could contribute to this. And so, they said, we'll take you. And so I found myself working alongside the presenter of the country music program. I'm not really a big country fan, but it was a good learning base, going out and collecting requests in from patients in the hospital for records they wanted to hear, putting the records back in their sleeves, Again, younger people probably think, what? Don't know what that means. But long before it was downloading and streaming, records came on vinyl. Vinyl was put in a protective sleeve, and then the protective sleeve was put inside an album cover. And so that's what I do, put them back and file them away, sort of in the record library and so on. And that was my first little taster. I never knew at that time that, doing that, or just having that taste or exposure to broadcasting, would eventually translate into, guess what, I'm going to be working, sort of 10, 15 years hence in, sort of in a broadcasting capacity, and, sort of news reading. Well, that just came about as, again, part of my traineeship. We got moved, we had placements, 3-month placements at different places, and I started off in Newsroom South East. Then I went along to Birmingham and Midlands Today, and it was Roy Sarchi, who was the editor of Midlands Today, who said, I want to give you a screen test. Have you done a screen test? And I said, up to no, I've never done it. But went for it, and he said, yep, I see potential. I'm going to give you a go. And so that led to me reading breakfast bulletins on to the audience in the Midlands. It was so strange, but to think, that started the sort of curiosity for, I suppose, working in broadcasting, sort of came from that little advert for volunteers for Woolwich Hospital Broadcasting Service.
Wow. And that's just testament to any young person, or anyone really. It doesn't matter what age you are, you've still got relevance. There's still, experience that you can give, and young or old. And so, if there's an older person who wants to be in the media, there are lots of different ways of doing it, like you said. What could they do because they've got all that wealth of experience, all those years? What could they do to share their story?
I think, again, it's about, there are quite a few community radio stations and things that, sort of people can get involved with. And, it's not too late to think about going back to school or to university, do one of these courses, and just to give you the formalized skills, because you come, an older person will come with, that life experience that is just worth so much.
That's so relevant and so true. So what other surprises been in the career that you've had?
That's a tough one. That's almost like, sort of what has been your favorite story. It's never an easy one, and I don't know. I mean, I had, sort of moments where I've thought, wow, pinch me, I'm driving a steam locomotive down a track, and I never thought I would ever, sort of get to do that, or maybe interviewing the great and the good, which is great, but also you get some amazing stories from people who aren't necessarily famous and in the public eye, but what a story they've got to tell about, that they've been driven, and they, sort of, you think again, somebody like Rose, who just thought, I think there is a need, and I'm going to do what I can to get this, sort of get people out there, so spearing campaigns to get, as I say, black men, sort of realizing and recognizing the reality of prostate cancer, to just people who've started a business and it began life in their back bedroom, it began life at their kitchen table, and has grown now into a multi, sort of million enterprise that, when they started out, they never thought that was going to happen. So it can be, I think it's just, I'm open to everything and anything, really.
Oh, Carol, I have loved spending this moment, this time with you, talking about your career, your life, and what the future holds for you, and how you've kept on learning and progressing and embracing change. And I think it's such a real inspiration to a lot of women, black and white, that are going to be watching this. And I just really want to thank you for all, being a pioneer in the field of media. And I can say to you that I have watched you in the mornings. It's been like a joy and a comfort to see someone that looks like me, presenting, and it's given me a real zest for life and an encouragement to keep going, keep pushing boundaries, and not give up, because there's so much, no matter how old we get, there's so much we still can do. We've got so much experience that we can offer to people, and it doesn't matter what life throws at us, because we are going to get the ups and the downs and the challenges and the losses and the grief. We're going to get all of this in life. But one thing we know for sure, that when we've got comfort in knowing that we've got someone that we can talk to, someone that we can communicate with, having a good friend, you don't have to see them all the time, but just knowing you can pick up the phone at any time is such a great thing. And I just really thank you for our friendship over the years. And I just want to say a prayer for you, Carol, and just to bless you. So, Lord, I thank you for Carol. I thank you for a zest for life, a zeal, a passion for her career. And I just pray that whoever she teaches and whoever she communicates with, that their life will be transformed just by her voice, encouraging them to keep going. And I thank you, Lord, for her. Amen.
Amen. Thank you.